Hi there, welcome to today's workplace series. Today, we're talking about debating. We're talking about consensus. We're talking about getting ideas on the table. Now, debating, it was part of my childhood and my school years. As a family, we debated at dinners all the time. Ideas, concepts, politics, opinions. So it was a pretty natural segue that I joined the debating squad at high school. I loved the energy, the conversations, and the learning. Now, when you think about the concept of debating, it harks back to ancient times, and it's designed to encourage participants to engage in reasoned and structured discussion so that they think differently, explore, and really learn about complex issues, but also recognize that there's two sides, sometimes even more than that, to every issue. Sadly, over time, the concept of debating in public discourse has eroded. You just have to look at the nature of political debates that happen before elections, as well as some of the debates that we see play out in the media. They can feel quite extreme and sometimes quite one-sided. When debates are poorly conceived and structured, it becomes that war of words. Words fly backwards and forwards. The participants, they're not listening to each other. They're not listening to learn or to see how they can rebut effectively. The object is to win at all costs. And if you can take your opponent down in some way, well, hey, that's just bonus points. Unfortunately, you also see this play out in the working world too. Consequently, engaging in debates at work can be seen as argumentative, as you being disagreeable. And so rigorous debating, deep debating of ideas, concepts is sometimes shunned. And instead, the idea is don't raise objections. Just go with the flow. Quickly get to that consensus. And in that way, seeking consensus has become ubiquitous, almost a part of decision making and problem solving. People think that everyone needs to agree, everyone needs to be happy. Now look, there is no doubt consensus building has its place, and there are many consensus building processes that are really important. They can foster agreement, harmony among individuals and groups, because when you look for consensus, you're finding that common ground. You're finding ways to get shared understanding. So there's no doubt there are times when you want to go for consensus. But there's also a danger, because consensus can kind of feel warm and fuzzy and really comforting because you found some sort of form of agreement. But the danger that lurks beneath the surface is when you blindly prioritize consensus, getting that consensus agreement above all else. Because when that happens, you've fallen into a consensus trap. Think about it as leaders. Leaders can often think that the sign of a healthy culture in their team or across the organization is that agreements are reached really quickly, that there's collegiality, little dissent, or little difference in opinions. It becomes that fallacy of consensus rules. You need to think about this for a minute, because when your team members are unwilling to challenge, unwilling to disagree with each other, it's a huge warning sign that something's wrong. Teams need to be able to robustly discuss, disagree as part of any healthy decision-making process. Otherwise, you're prone to bias, error, and groupthink. Consensus-seeking processes can inadvertently foster groupthink, and that's a phenomenon where the desire for harmony, cohesion, or conformity within a group leads to poor decision-making because different opinions aren't expressed. Groupthink occurs when individuals prioritize consensus over critical thinking and independent analysis. The fear of being perceived as the dissenter, the outsider, the disruptor can discourage team members from expressing opinions that are different to the norm, different to the majority of the group. And that then means that you only end up with a narrow range of ideas and that leads to the increased likelihood of confirmation bias. ANU Professor Andrew Hopkins, he's written extensively on risk failures and the dangers of consensus decision making. He's an expert in this field, and he's found that groups are often more inclined to make riskier decisions than individuals because of a process that he calls de-individualization. And how this plays out is that because many people are responsible for the decision, the individual actually steps back. The individual feels as though they're not personally responsible for it, and therefore they're more likely to take risks and be persuaded by the group to go against their own values. Now he says, and I'm quoting here, everyone is responsible for the decision, which means that in turn, that no one person feels personally responsible, and the end result, non-responsible decision making. End of quote. Now, avoiding this issue is more difficult when you're working in an environment where debate is either curtailed or completely silenced. So if you're a leader who falls into the trap of taking the path of least resistance and making popular decisions, easy decisions, then you're far more likely to fall into this trap as well. For leaders, when you're facing uncharted territory, relying on what you've done in the past or what you've seen or experienced in the past, using those default thinking patterns, that's fraught with danger. Complex, adaptive problems aren't solved by the quick fix, or at times relying on those learned behaviors. And that's because we don't make decisions on facts alone. Our brain, clever as it is, it filters information. It discards information that it doesn't see as fitting with its worldview. And so it takes what we call a mental shortcut as it's trying to conserve energy and decide what to do in the fastest possible way. As a leader, if you want an innovative culture, a culture that encourages progress, creativity, change, you need to be willing to be challenged, to hear diverse perspectives, and that's only going to happen when your team members feel safe to share their ideas. So think about it. In group dynamics, in the team that you're in, are there dominant voices or influential individuals who are exerting undue influence over the decision-making process? Does that then mean that there are people who feel marginalized or silenced? Are there perspectives that are being overlooked or dismissed? You want to really understand whether there are existing power structures in your organization and team that are reinforcing the status quo and making it harder for change or different ideas to be expressed. All of these factors can lead to you thinking that there's actually consensus because everyone's agreeing, but in fact there's not consensus. You want to be able to embrace the uncertainty. You need to be open to the challenge of the conversations, constantly seeking out new ideas and input from a broad range of people. And don't just listen to the people who always have an opinion. Consciously seek out different opinions. This means you want to be naturally curious, naturally open-minded. And you also want to encourage your team to engage in what I call spirited conversations, rather than really shallow, silent, kind of stunted conversations that don't advance the decision-making process. Spirited conversations create energy, spark new ideas. They help people think more clearly about their position because they're open to different ideas. These conversations are curious, full of questions, really open to different ideas. Actually, they want those different ideas to be tabled. The people involved want to pull it apart. They want to look at things in lots of different angles, and it's a really safe space for the difficult topics to be surfaced and those challenging ideas to be shared. Over time, what this does is it creates a cultural norm where ideas are shared, things are challenged, because everyone involved knows that by doing that, you're going to get better, more robust decisions, and all of that leads to better outcomes for all. So the question for you, what debate do you need to start at work today? Take care, have a great week. I'll see you next week.